Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Tunnel Vision, a show brought to you by USCFootball.com. I'm your host, Keely Eure, joined by Shotgun Spratling, and filling in for the sick Ryan Abraham, three-time former All-American USC safety Taylor Mays. Guys, thanks for joining me today.
Keely, what's going on?
I keep hearing three-time All-American. Like, can I just have one? I mean, you got three.
Should have been four, maybe? Not
You
sure.
know what's weird is I'm really into even numbers, so I'd rather have two because two is a little just more.
I'll take one.
Why not?
Take
Why
it,
not
it's
up?
fine.
Why not four?
Yeah, four. Well, four is a square too, so it makes more sense in terms of.
Well, now we're
just
getting
the
the
even
numerology
number.
here.
Interesting. Okay. Well, like I mentioned, Ryan Abraham is out sick. If you catch these guys coughing, it's not because they're sick. It's because I sprayed this whole studio with Lysol. So I'm making sure we're not getting whatever Ryan has, but we hope he feels better. We have a lot to talk about today. Our first show of 2020. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you had a safe holiday. USC picked up a commit over the weekend at the Army All-American Bowl. It's not the Army All-American Bowl. It's just the All-American Bowl now. So Shotgun, you'll get into that. And then Taylor, we haven't actually talked to you since the Holiday Bowl. I know you were on the radio show with Ryan, but we didn't get your thoughts about that. And now the news of Clancy Pendergast and John Baxter not being retained by USC. I guess first up, to go chronologically, Taylor, just really quick, your thoughts about the Holiday Bowl and how USC finished the season.
Well, obviously, I was disappointed, just like everybody else, in kind of the season and really just how we ended up finishing this season, especially as a defensive player, how we finished on defense. I think that was the most frustrating thing for me. And a lot of the things that I've seen with our guys on defense are things that I think are correctable, things that they have control of. A lot of times, like if a 6'5" Michael Pittman type receiver is just jumping over a 5'10" corner, you can't do a whole lot about that. So those guys are just going to win those matchups. But a lot of the errors that we were making on defense had to do with guys' responsibilities that they have control of, and I think that was one of the most frustrating things for me. And we knew with USC retaining, or did we know we were going to retain Clay before the bowl game, or did that come after?
Yes.
We knew before. Okay, so with that, it would have been a lot better, obviously, if we would have been able to win that bowl game. So I think it kind of just was a worst case scenario that it ended the way that it did. However, I will say this. One of the things, it's going to be a rough 6, 7, 8 months, however long, until we get to training camp and spring football. But this football team has a chance to be a good football team next year. It's going to be kind of a long road getting back to where we want to be. But the offense is going to be hot. The defense has a ton of players returning, so it's kind of good and bad. Like, it's kind of like having to live in purgatory. Like, it's going to be a rough time right now, and we just kind of have to get through it. So it's frustrating, but at least for us, I think there could possibly be some light at the end of the tunnel.
As a player, did you ever end a season with a bad taste in your mouth? What was the offseason like for you, if so?
Not in college. Well, my last year, we were mediocre. I think we finished season 9-4, which this current team finished
8-5.
Yeah, we would have smoked this year's team, but we were just okay. But we had lost to like Arizona, I think, on senior day, last regular season game of the year, and it just was kind of tough losing. That was the same season that we got blown out by Stanford at home. And in football, you learn a lot of things that help not just on the football field, but also in everyday life. And it's just one of them things that you carry on. Living and preparing the same way that you would if you would have won the game. And hopefully for these guys, they're able to do it. The problem is I feel like they've had a lot of these experiences where they should be learning from something and then applying it, and making themselves individually and then collectively as a team better going forward, but it doesn't seem to be happening. So hopefully guys can, really evaluate themselves this offseason. Coaches can evaluate themselves and figure out, what we need to do going forward.
I didn't mention this at the top of the show, but be sure to call in 512-4TUNNEL. Your call will be screened by our intern, Micah. You can also tweet at us, #TunnelVision. I'll put your tweet up on the screen. And, of course, wherever you're watching, Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, put your comments, questions, concerns, and we will answer them. And for those of you just coming in, Ryan is sick today, so Taylor is filling in. But, Taylor, I know you watched this year's defense extensively. What was your diagnosis of what was going wrong? Was it more scheme or fundamentals or both?
Well, most defensive coaches, I think, will say that we should be able to line up and play a defense and be able to execute and be successful. So very rarely, in my opinion, does it actually come down to scheme, a bad defensive play call. You see it more on offense. Like it might be a bad call to call against a certain, maybe a blitz or a run into a certain front or something like that. But on defense, everybody has a responsibility and everybody's responsible for, staying in the A gap, B gap, C gap, or, being outside and being the containment player. So I would just like to see our guys doing, like I was saying earlier, and I probably said the entire season, I'd like to see our guys doing the little things right. And once you do the little things right, you can live with a loss or you can live with maybe getting beat on a play because you did everything that you could leading up to that point. But another thing that I would like to see especially for our secondary, for our linebackers, we have to play better on third down. And we have to have better situational awareness on third down, being that sometimes it'd be third and mid, which is like, 5 to 7, and our guys are kind of sitting off. And a lot of times offenses are running quick routes, slants, 3-step in routes, stuff like that. And we need our defensive guys to be sitting on those routes almost at the first down marker and then breaking. But the guys are giving too much ground. It's happening in the red zone also, 20 yards, 10-yard line. Guys are playing too soft, and they need to be playing underneath the routes because the pitch and catch is a lot shorter once you get into the red zone. And that's just situational football. And, again, that's something that guys have control of. But a lot of times what happens is you get into a football game, you get tired, I don't know, you hit somebody, your head hurts, your finger breaks, and guys have to be able to be consistent under pressure and just be able to, like a lot of times when you watch the film after the game, guys will say, man, how did I miss that play? How come I didn't think about that? Because they're sitting in a air-conditioned film room and everything's comfortable. They don't have the pressure of being tired or their coach yelling at them. But we need our guys to be able to perform and really just be calm at all times and be able to be confident in executing the game plan. And that's the thing that, especially young players, college football players, we try to develop our guys into being those types of players so that they can go out there and execute. And that's where I think the biggest gap is for us currently.
In that sense, and Shotgun, you can chime in on this too, what do you want to see from USC's next defensive coordinator? What attributes or skill sets do you want them to have?
I mean, I think just for me to start, you'll probably have more to say because you've dealt with more defense coordinators, but just you want to see them be able to use guys and, to their strengths, instead of just focusing on scheme or the opponent, do stuff. USC just seems like they're so reactive on defense. It was all about what the offense was doing at all times rather than we're going to force the issue with certain things. Now, USC blitzed a lot. Clancy Pendergast likes to bring pressure, but I still felt like those pressures were based on what the offense was doing. It just didn't seem like they were going to say, you know what, Talanoa Hufanga is really good at this certain aspect. Yeah. We're going to put him in his position, and we're going to build something around him. Or Palia Naitiote is really good at this. Let's focus on him doing this one aspect and see what we can do around him with certain things. Like the star players on the team, it didn't seem like they were the defense was focused around them. So I'd like to see a little bit more of kind of a star-focused defense, a star-focused attack, I would say. Use your best players to their best ability, put them in the position where they can impact the game a lot because in college football especially, one big defensive play can swing everything. Yeah. If you can be stable and let, with 7 or 8 guys and let a couple, one guy on each level maybe, be able to have a little bit more freedom and, let them try to make a big play at times.
Yeah.
I think that can can swing a game a lot more, especially with as many points are being put up now.
Yeah.
One big defensive play and, the ball going the other way, because USC's turnover numbers just have not been very good the last few years, and I think that's part of it. I think that's something I would look for.
Yeah. No, I think you're 100% correct, especially talking about putting your best players in position to make plays. USC's probably greatest safety, Troy Polamalu. If you ever watched Troy on film in the NFL and in college, he would come down, he would come into the box, and he was just able to read, diagnose play extremely fast, and then get straight to the ball. And I see Talanoa, because he's kind of an in-the-box safety, being that type of player. But one thing that I would like to see and I think needs to happen is guys like Talanoa and even Isaiah Polamau, they kind of have to be developed into being those players, and they need to understand why on defense they're doing certain things, where the weakness in the defense is, and like even with what you're saying, it's almost like with the defense, you want to have to force the offense to stop us, but us being on defense. Put our pass rushers in a position to put pressure on the quarterback and force them to have to adjust their offense off of us. But at the same time, we need some of our players, especially in the linebacking core and in the secondary, to understand, like if there's a bunch on third down, there's only 3 or 4 routes that offenses run out of bunch. It's a 4-7-3, which is a guy going to the flat, a guy running the hook route, and the tight end running a 7 route. I mean, it's a couple of routes, And if we could get our guys in the position where they're able to see certain things like that, that's when football becomes so much easier. And that's when the Troy Polamalu types of players really create themselves, because they see something, they realize how an offense works and what an offense might do to try and expose the defense. And then they know what they need to do within the defense to be successful. And I think our guys, like you're saying, they're just kind of they're reacting. Mm-hmm. They're doing, okay, well, this is my job, so I got to cover this guy. But they're not necessarily seeing the whole picture. So that's where I use the word developing, because we want to develop the players from their freshman year to when they leave, being able to, get better, not just physically, but, mentally and with their football IQ. And so hopefully we'll see that from some of our guys on defense, and hopefully whoever we bring in as a new DC will be able to educate the players, because once you get that down, everything in football slows down. Once you start to realize why certain things are happening, it really slows down for you.
Yeah, the first thing you got to do is obviously a player has to take care of their own assignment.
Yeah.
But then the next step in that progression is knowing everything else that's going on around you. Yeah. So if you say you're a cornerback and you're playing cover 2 and it's 3rd and 17, you don't have to be up there on that guy. Yeah. You can drop back further. You see the routes that are developing, and maybe you come off, and that's when you get an interception on an underneath pick, and quarterback goes to the sidelines like, I never saw that guy. Those type of plays are created by taking that next step in the development. And I don't know that we've seen enough of the high-end guys doing that, in recent years. So that's something that you're really looking forward is our guys pushing past, all right, now I got my assignment down.
Yeah.
Now can you do more?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you want to see. You want to see teams, with their offensive scheme, it's not just, okay, this is how we're going to attack their defense. It's, okay, we got to worry about Drake Jackson coming off the edge. We need to put a tight end over there. And that starts, when you start being able to do that, then it limits the offense. Yeah. Because, okay, we have to have an extra blocker over there. So now, what we're able to do, we can't go 5 wide as much as we wanted to, or whatever. It changes what the offense can do. And the more you can limit the offense, the less plays they can run. Yeah. The more chance the defense knows what play is coming, and then they're able to react and make a big play off of it.
Kind of to your guys' points, one of the knocks on Pendergast's defense was the complicatedness of it, how much it took younger players time to learn the ins and outs of the defense. Looking back, how much did that hamper maybe the potential growth of the defensive players?
Well, it's gotta. I mean, if I didn't speak to any of the players about that, but if that's what they're saying, a coach has to take that into consideration. So there has to be a balance of coach giving the players the right amount of content and the players being able to be responsible to learn it and then being able to apply it. But if there's miscommunication in there and you just have players who are every single play just worried about just getting lined up, like, because anybody can go out there and kind of get lined up and I tell you, okay, you have to jam this number one receiver and kind of sink to the flat. But there's so much more that goes on the football field. And technically you can get a okay on your grade sheet saying that you did your job. But I think that's where, for us, our guys are just not seeing everything. And I don't know if that's a coaching thing. I don't know if it's the fault of our players or if it's just both. Because I would assume that it's probably both. I don't think that Coach Clancy was ever a bad coach. I think that's one of the faults of a lot of coaches who have coached in the NFL and coach in college, because you're dealing with different people. You're dealing, like in the NFL, I think I've said this before, you're dealing with guys who it's their job. They're a little probably more mature. Like they understand how defenses work, and they understand how to prepare, how to study, how to watch film. A lot of these guys in college come from high school. Everybody tells them that they're great. They think that they're the next coming, and they don't really know how to watch film. They don't know how to look at the splits of the wide receivers. They don't know how to look at the depth of the running back. They probably don't even, some of the guys don't even know how to really read run pass. So some of it goes on to the position coaches, and I would say that position coaches can be a great influence on a lot of the players, because a defensive coordinator is basically like a head coach of the defense. He kind of oversees everything, but you spend most of your time with your position coach. So it's just a hard balance, and you want to have just the right balance, and you want to have your players learning progressively throughout the season, and hopefully, as we see what happens in the next couple of weeks or months or however long it takes, we get somebody in here and it's just the right equation for what we need for this team, with the personality of the players and with that matches up with the coaches that we have coming in on defense.
Yeah, we have a call about candidates that I'm going to jump to in a second. But Taylor, you and I actually talked about this on the radio show, if anyone caught that after the game. But if you have the same head coach, can a defensive coordinator really change the culture or style of a team if you still have the same head coach? Meaning, if you bring in a defensive coordinator and Clay says, hey, let's not go full tackle in practice, is whoever they bring in going to be hampered by the head coach and their style?
So, like when people were expressing their feelings about USC keeping Clay, and some people were upset about it. In reality, I thought of it as like when we're talking about defense coordinator and them getting a new defense coordinator. When I was in, this is the NFL, but when I was in Cincinnati, Marvin Lewis was the head coach. Mike Zimmer was the defense coordinator. Mike Zimmer is now the head coach in Minnesota. Mike Zimmer was like, Marvin didn't really even need to come in the defensive room because Mike Zimmer handled everything. He was one of the best defensive coaches that you ask anybody that's played under him, they all tell you he's one of the best defensive coaches that are out there. And so I think personally, and I'm surprised I didn't really think of this before until you and I talked about it, Keely, but a new defensive coordinator, especially if it's the type of defensive coordinator that's maybe been a head coach before, can change the entire defense. And I think that's one of the things that good head coaches do, is they let their coaches underneath them coach.
Yeah.
So especially if Clay's a coach who's had an offensive history, he gets a defensive coordinator in who knows what they're doing, has confidence in what they're doing. The offense is going to be solid next year. We don't have to worry about the offense. A guy comes in on defense, he does his thing. If I don't know what Clay's opinion is on tackling, but I'm sure a new defensive coordinator is going to voice what he thinks the defensive players should be doing. And he can kind of set a new standard just for the defense. It doesn't, we're not talking about the offensive linemen or the running backs, just for the defense. Yep. I think that's what this defense needs going into next year.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Alrighty, let's go to our first live caller of the night. I believe it is John from Glendora. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hey guys, what's up? I just got two quick things. I was at the Holiday Bowl. I still feel I didn't call last week, but I just had to call this week. I agree with Taylor, but they just look so soft. That defense looks so soft. They don't look like nothing like the defenses we used to see before being an SC fan, going to games. And the other thing is, they really need to get a coordinator. I feel it should be Charlie Strong, somebody with a tough mentality, somebody that can really lead the team. I don't know about you guys, whatever you guys think.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, I think you want someone that's going to come in, and Clancy Pendergast is more of a soft-spoken guy, at least in the media and just kind of in general. You want kind of that field general to come out there because you're looking for someone to kind of change the dynamic, I think, with the way things have gone previously. I mean, Clancy's a guy that would get all over players. No, don't get me wrong about that, and most coaches will do that. But you want the guy that's kind of the screamer. You know, they don't really have that on the staff right now. And I've said before that you kind of want a combination of a guy. You want a staff built, you know, with a big variety, you know, everything from age to race to having someone that's willing to go over and put your arm around someone at one point, or having the guy that's going to yell and be in your face. You need a variety of those things to be able to build out a coaching staff that's really dynamic. So I think they need someone to come in and be, you know, the enforcer of the group, kind of. You know, the strength staff can only do so much, and you know those guys that are on the staff right now aren't big yellers and stuff on the sideline. You know, I would like to see people get lit up on the sideline every once in a while. You know, just when they don't do their assignment, get on them. So I think that's something I'm looking for. Someone that has head coaching experience would probably be good. Because if you go into a situation and you start off really bad and they do make a change, you're looking at an interim coach, which might be how you lure someone like Charlie Strong or someone who has a background as a head coach, and they're like, I don't want to be involved in that situation that's going on at USC. Well, you know, if we do have to make a move, you'd probably be the interim guy. You know, those type of things, are sells to a potential defense coordinator. Like I said, I would look for someone aggressive. As well, just to take advantage of USC's speed and size that they do have, and to create more of that physicality instead of sitting back. You know, the Justin Wilcox style has worked really well everywhere else he's been, except at USC, because it was a bend but break style, and bend but don't break, and USC was never really aggressive, and they haven't had that aggressive mentality. They did have like I said, they attacked a lot under Clancy Pendergast, but I want to see it in a little bit different way. So, you know, those are the things that I'm looking for in a defense coordinator. You know, a guy like Charlie Strong could be a good fit. You know, we've seen that Clay is looking, there's reports that Clay's been looking at the NFL ranks as some people. You know, Joe Barry, former USC linebackers coach, could be a potential good hire there, depending on what the Rams do. There's some other guys that names are out there, and you know the NFL coaching carousel is kind of working its way now. You know the Cowboys finally made a move with Jason Garrett, so you're basically seeing the head coaches now. Now you go to the next level where the coordinators or the assistant coaches, and it kind of flows from there. So I think some names will open up, and I think the USC is looking at some of those names as well.
Yeah.
Is there any concern dipping back into the NFL well when you had a former NFL coordinator who didn't really know how to recruit in this day and age of recruiting and whatnot?
Well, it just depends on who we were talking about. Because if you look at Pete Carroll, he came from the NFL, and it worked for him at USC. So I think it's just something that Coach Helton and Mike Bohn have to take into consideration. Because there's guys who are in the NFL as coaches who would be phenomenal at recruiting in college football. They just some coaches have that kind of personality, that morale. They just know how to come in and talk to people and tell them, you know, everything they want to hear. So that's just, I don't know if it's, like I said, it's hard with NFL coaches, because especially with coaches that have been in the NFL for a long time, especially old school type of football coaches. But I think nowadays, some of these guys in the NFL would be able to come into college football and really do a great job at being able to recruit.
There's some guys that are really good at one or the other.
Yeah.
You know, the stability of the NFL, kind of knowing that players already know the basics, and, you know, they're going to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
There's other guys that are really good at teaching that doesn't really translate as well to the NFL. And there's some guys that can do both. Pete Carroll has won at both levels, obviously. There's other guys like Mike Tomlin, I think, would be phenomenal in college. I think he has the energy. You're looking for a guy in the college ranks. Having charisma really helps as far as recruiting for one, but also just teaching. And can you teach the basics? Those are the things you're going to look for. You're going to need that in your position coaches and your defense coordinator at the college level much more than you do at the pro level. The pro level it's so much more about scheme than it is about the fundamentals, the technique. All those things still play in. Don't take that away. But it's much more about scheme and being able to create and exploit a weakness than it is in the college game, where you can out athlete people at times. You can out skill them because you have a big difference there if you recruit the right players. So that there's a much bigger difference from the haves and have-nots in college than there is in the NFL. So that's why it's much more about the players and the players creating plays and making plays rather than NFL. Where it's the line is so thin between the top teams and the bottom teams. So I think that's a big thing there. You're looking for someone who has a little bit of charisma. Younger guys often have a lot more energy, but doesn't have to be that way. You can find some old school guys that really want to attack things, and a guy like Ed Orgeron is an old school guy and an older guy, but he has a ridiculous amount of energy. The amount of Red Bulls and Diet Cokes that he drinks. I think they had pallets for him at USC when he was here.
Wow, sounds like you, Shotgun.
Yeah, he would go through I think it was 3 or 4 or 5 Red Bulls on a national signing day. He would just be pounding them. It was one of those days that you had to attack vigorously, and he was going to. So you're looking for someone with energy and charisma on the recruiting trail, but again, teaching is a huge thing, and that's what USC is going to need in their position coaches and defense coordinator.
I'm going to jump back into calls in a second, but Chalk, one of the critiques about Clay Helton is his quote-unquote Rolodex. Do you think that can kind of be buried after the Cliff Kingsbury, Graham Harrell? He was able to get people in the door even when he was quote-unquote on the hot seat, or do you think that still stands, that critique of him?
I think that, it's a valid critique based on the hires that he has made previously, but I think he showed on that last cycle that he's willing to go outside of his comfort zone. That's the biggest thing with the Rolodex is, I know this guy, I know what he does, I know how he acts, so I know what I'm getting from him. Whereas if you go outside of it and you hire a big name and, hey, he's I thought he was this way, but he's not really. He's a guy that, causes an uproar in the coaches meeting or whatever. He demands his way, and I wasn't looking for that type of, or whatever it may be, then that's when you can get yourself in trouble going outside. So that's when it comes to getting recommendations from people, the interview process itself, going through and just, meeting people and finding out about them, those things. And I think Clay did that much more the last cycle, not only just with Cliff Kingsbury and then Graham Harrell. And I think that was a lot to do with scheme. He wanted someone to go with that air raid style, so he's looking for that. But also some of the assistant coach hires, like Chad Kay, where did he come from? What ties did he have to USC? Greg Burns had been at USC, but did he have ties to Clay Helton?
Staff,
No, not really. So, I think that he went out and looked for individual talents more than, guys that he knew in this past cycle. So I think that lends you to believe that he would do the same this time. Especially the more you're on the hot seat and the more your job's on the line, you want the best guy. Rather than the guy that you trust, or the guy that you're comfortable with, you want the best guy.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's jump in back to our calls. Our next caller, I believe, is Brandon or Brendan from Minnesota. Hello, you're live on television.
Hi, guys. So my question is, even if we get the right defense coordinator or special teams coordinator, is that even still going to be able to be enough to push us over the hump to even get to a national championship or even win the Pac-12 championship if we have Clay Helton as our head coach?
I think that there is still plenty of talent on this team. And I think if the talent is put in the right positions, yes, they can win 10 games. They can win 11 games. They can be Pac-12 champions. I don't think they're going to get over the hump and be national champions. I think that comes with the physical practices, the physical mindset, and we haven't seen the mindset from these teams.
Yeah.
They don't give up. They didn't give up this season. The only game was really the Oregon game. Yeah. Last season, we did see that there were times when the team just kind of gave up on them. So I think they made a mindset change there. However, just that physicality mindset where it hurts so bad when you lose a single game rather than, you lost 5 games this year, you lost, 7 last year, and still there's players that during the Oregon game were posing for pitchers and stuff.
Yeah.
You need a coach, and this can be a defensive coordinator. It doesn't have to be a head coach. It really, in my opinion, can be just a defensive coordinator. But you need one that is really going to hold these players accountable. And a lot of the things that we saw throughout the season seem to continue to happen. And like Shotgun's talking about, just kind of the demeanor of some of the players just didn't seem right for a team that was losing games, getting beat pretty bad. What was that, the Oregon game? Just kind of the way that it played out didn't seem right. And you need a coach that's going to come in and say, hey, this is BS. I'm not putting up with any of this. This is what we're going to do. And if you don't want to be a part of it, get out of here. And then it forces guys, like if there's too much leeway for guys to kind of make mistakes and not be corrected on it, guys should be scared to come in if they made a mistake in the game. They should be scared to, if you're my teammate and I let you down, I should be scared to look at you because I don't want to let you down as my teammate, right? And that's what these guys need to get to that level. And you're talking about physicality. One thing that I want to see out of our guys is I want them to be bullies. Not play dirty or anything like that, but when you see bullies on defense because they're just out there just hitting everything moving. And some of that is a mindset, and the guys have to be kind of pushed that way. They need to be developed. They need to be spoken to that way, like we're talking about earlier, because they're college kids. They're 18 to 22. They see other they see NFL players, they watch highlight tapes, guys who were having big hits, but they haven't necessarily developed the mindset for it, right? And you want a coach that can come in and help these guys, show them the blueprint to how they have that success. And if we do that, I think that the offense will be solid. And if they don't score against us, the team can't beat us, right? So that should be the attitude that the defense has. This is 10 years ago, 11 years ago, the practices were so competitive that guys on defense will be upset if in the 9-on-7 drill, the offense ran for a yard. That just was how it was. And you look at the Miami of the 2000s or the Florida States or even like Nebraska in the 90s. That's how they practice every single day. And that's why those football teams were so good, because everything was so competitive all the time. And now we're treating our guys like they're 15-year NFL veterans and they're just practicing in helmets. And we need to get back to the basics of what makes football players and football teams great.
So what you're saying is it all starts in practice, the mindset and the physicality.
I think the mindset, the physicality, I think it starts in practice. I think it starts now in the weight room. I think it's just I truly think that it's something that you don't just turn it off or turn it on. It's something that you have to it's something that you live and you breathe, and otherwise you're just kind of faking the funk. You know what I mean? You're walking around like you want to be a tough guy, and all the Instagram dancing and all this stuff and all the but you're not really living it, because the guys that are really living it are doing it day in, day out, and they understand it. Every time you step out on the football field and put your helmet on, you got to prove yourself again and again and again, and that's what I want to see out of our guys. But they need to be shown what that feels like and pushed into that direction. Yeah. Hopefully we'll see that.
Yeah, as much as you have to develop tackling or develop blocking or develop, pass catching, you also have to develop tenacity.
Exactly.
That's something that high school kids don't necessarily come in with. You're used to being, if you're Taylor Mays in high school, you dominate everybody because you're so much physically bigger than them. Now, he still was bigger than everybody in college too, but so you're not a great example. But all these players are, just physically bigger than guys when they come in. So they're used to being able to throw people around and get their own way, basically. Now, when you have someone that's the same size or maybe even bigger than you or faster or strong, now how do you go about your business? You have to develop the tenacity as well to be more tough than the other team. Yeah. It's much easier to do that, when you're the small guy than it is when you're the big guy. Like, you don't have that built in necessarily because you've just been able to throw people around easily. Now that it's an equal battle, okay, now you got to actually develop that. And that's the thing in college. College is so much about development.
Yeah.
And it's not just one thing or the other thing. It's not just the fundamentals of tackling. It's the fundamentals mentally as well. You got to go through those things. And I think those are the things that have kind of been left behind a little bit in the past, a few years under USC.
Yep, makes sense. Let's go to our next caller. I believe it is Rodney from Fort Lewis, Washington. Hello, you are live on Tunnel Vision.
Hey, what's going on? So I just want to ask just two things real quick. One, is it true that Mike Bohn is taking the lead on the next defensive coordinator hire, basically giving Clay Helton the choices to make, in a sense? And I guess the second thing would be, what can USC fans hold on to for hope that the season is actually going to be better next season? Because that's all we've been hearing is that, oh, next year we're going to be better here, we're going to be better there, we're a young team, injuries, BS. So what do you think we can hold on to as far as hope to, you know what I'm saying, to be excited for the season next year?
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for the call, Rodney. Shoddington?
The Bone stuff, there's certain reporters that you shouldn't listen to every rumor that they put out there. I'll just leave it at that.
Ooh, shady shot.
Now, every hire is usually a process that involves multiple people. This is in any line of business. It's very rare that you just go, I want that guy, and that's who you get. Now, some coaches have all that power. Nick Saban probably has all that power. Even though the AD Byrne at Alabama, I'm sure he has input, and you go about figuring out how you're going to make things work. It's very rare that someone just has all personnel, input. In the NFL, it doesn't work that way. The head coach doesn't say, I want that player, and that's who you get. No, you have a GM. It's a collaborative experience. That's similar with the head coach and an AD. And if you read The War Room, there's something in there about a little bit about that and how those type things, if you just tell a coach, hey, you're going to get this coach, those things don't necessarily work out. Usually doesn't work out very well because, like I said, there can be butting heads. The philosophies don't work out, the same. So no, I don't believe that to be true.
As far as hope?
As far as hope for the future, what leads people to believe that there is hope? Now, the stuff about what is BS is the talk about injuries and this is a young team. When you said it 3 years in a row, let's just cut that out. All right. Now, the defense is younger, and there are a lot of guys that are going to be returning. You get Marlon Tuipulotu and Jay Tufele back in the middle, which the longer the process goes, before January 15th was the last day, the more you believe those guys are coming back. Then you're basically returning everyone on defense, and you think that, especially you get someone like Solomon Tulialapupu back, you get a couple of guys healthy that were banged up this year. That could be a really good defense because now it has experience. And I think one of the things I wanted to point out when you were talking about Clancy Pendergast is because he's an NFL guy, I think it was more difficult for him to come in. I think if he would have come in with a veteran defense that knew what they were doing and then took over that defense, then I think he would have had a much better chance of success, which is what I think he kind of had the first time he was at USC, is had guys like Leonard Williams and stuff. You had veteran guys that were out there, and he could tell them what to do, and they would do it. And it was a little bit different. The last 3 years there have been young guys in there. Partially it's the coach's fault because of the way they've structured their recruiting and stuff, and some guys that they've lost for off-the-field issues and whatnot. So those are excuses. Make adjustments, not excuses. That's what one of my coaches used to tell me. MANE, make adjustments, not excuses. He didn't want to hear anything. So stop making the same excuses. Mm-hmm. Go out there and make plays now and put these players in the right position. Now, is there hope? Yes, because there is that defense is returning. The offense, you've seen what it can do, and you've got a young quarterback. You've got two guys that are young quarterbacks, you have a redshirt sophomore and a sophomore, and JT Daniels and Keaton Slovis. I think that both of them fit really well in this offense. So I think that you have some pieces on offense you're really excited about. If you can keep the offensive line together, then I think there's a lot of hope going into next season that both the offense and the defense can take another step forward. And then if the defense takes a jump like the offense did this year, you look at the numbers just rankings-wise that the offense, their jump did. The defense makes a similar rank, and you're in the top 20, top 30 of a lot of statistical categories, then you're going to have a top 15 team at USC. I think that's the biggest thing. They've been either the offense is really good one year or the defense is good, or just neither one of them was good for a couple years. If you get the defense on the same level as the offense was this year, which wasn't great, but it was pretty good, closing in on really good.
Yeah.
So if you get them on that level, then you're going to win a lot more games, and I think that's where the hope can stem from.
Taylor, hope? Do you believe in hope?
Yeah, but I mean, I understand what the caller Rodney's saying, because in myself included, I'm kind of saying, well, okay, the offense is going to be really solid next year, and the defense has a chance to be pretty good. But at the same time, we got to acknowledge, and I want to acknowledge the struggles that the team has had the past 2 seasons. And to me, one of the things that if we don't fix this, it's going to be a problem no matter how good the offense is. And it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier a little bit, and we haven't talked about special teams yet, but defense and special teams kind of go together, meaning that a lot of defensive players play on special teams, on the coverage aspect of special teams. And one thing that's bothered me about USC football is I don't see the special teams players doing everything they can trying to make a name for themselves. And most of the time in college football, you have young guys on special teams who they're getting one play, maybe a quarter, 5-10 plays a game on special teams, and they're busting everything they have to try and make a play to just make a name for themselves among their peers, the older guys on the team. You look at Michael Pittman. That's what made Michael Pittman Jr. who he is, was working hard on special teams. And I don't see that from watching our special teams, and the kind of the correlation to the defense. Something is just off to me. I think that our guys, it's almost like when Rocky got beat up by Mr. T, and he was training in the gym, and there's all the cameras around, and then he went to LA and trained with Paulo. I know it's a joke, but like I'm actually really serious, because he went to the gym, he got his hands dirty, like I was saying, he kind of went back to the basics and laid the foundation. And I think that's what this football team needs to do. We can have athletes and have the experience, but if our guys aren't being held responsible, Isaiah Polamau, he gets beat around the edge a couple of times a game. He'll make a great play, but he has to be more consistent, especially as a safety, because when he's not, it's a huge play. And if he could make 50% of the plays, 50% of the plays that he makes mistakes on, our defense would play a lot better as a group. And I'm being hard on him because he's a safety, and safeties can't make mistakes, because when they make mistakes, it's a big play. And so all the experience and things like that, to me, that doesn't affect a guy just going out there and doing his responsibility. You can put a true freshman out there and tell him to stay outside the ball, and he can stay outside the ball if it's important to him. And I just want to see our guys have that fire and desire. I think our guys want to be great football players. I think they want to continue to add to the legacy that is USC football. But I just don't think they're necessarily going about it the right way, or they just need to be pushed in the right direction. And so it's kind of like hope, but it only get us so far.
You guys are bad at hope.
I think it's also, to your point on special teams, is developing mentality. Because you look at a guy like Michael Pittman Jr.
Yeah.
Why did he have this mentality? Because he has a Super Bowl winning father that has pushed him throughout his life.
Yeah.
Not every other player has that.
Yeah.
So when they get to college, someone needs to push them in that direction. And I think that's the fire that you see in Michael Pittman. You see Micah Pittman, his younger brother, is already starring at Oregon in a similar fashion, because they've had someone to push them in a certain way because they knew what needed to be done. Well, you need your college coaches to do that for you as well. And I think that there's a lot of players that have the athleticism, the skill set on USC. If they're pushed in the right direction, then you could see them take big jumps in their game. And on special teams would be one of the places where, hey, you want to go out there and make a play.
Make a name for yourself.
And,
make a play.
if you're a safety and you make a couple plays and now someone, makes a couple mistakes, you've made 3 plays already in the game on special teams. They might be like, you know what, get him out there. Go out there and get an opportunity because you've been playing hard on special teams and been making plays. That guy's going to make another play when you put him on defense too, and that's how it builds and snowballs on itself. And if you're a young player, that's how you earn more and more playing time.
So you get your stripes.
Yep. Thanks, Rodney, for the call. And Taylor, you always talk about how special teams, it's where the details matter, and it kind of speaks to the whole team as well, right?
Yeah, it's where the details matter, and it's the same thing that I'm talking about with defense, the little things. We talk about it all the time. It gets repetitive. It probably gets annoying, but it is the most important thing in football. So,
We're going to jump into questions. Taylor, you got a shout out from Warren G on YouTube. He says, I'm Elijah's dad. I met you in the suites. So, a little celebrity shout
I came
out.
over and said, what's up? G-Funk era, 1994.
Warren Child said on YouTube, I believe, why has everyone got a lynch mob mentality towards Clay Helton? Has it ever crossed your minds that the players and leaders on the team are just as accountable for the shortcomings?
To an extent, there are certain players that need to step up, and that's where you need leadership. But again, I think that all starts with the coaching staff developing that mentality so that the leaders on the team know they're the ones that need to hold their teammates accountable on the sideline at times. And they're the ones that if they see someone posing for a picture, like, dude, what the hell are you doing? We're getting our ass beat. You need to straighten up or whatever.
Yeah.
But it starts at the top. Everything always starts at the top. Your mentality starts at the top. So it's the lynch mob mentality with Helton is because USC has a standard and they're not living up to that standard. And so now all the fans are out because it's been 2 consecutive seasons. So that's why they're coming after him. But yes, also, you need your leaders. Leaders need to step up, and leaders need to take action at times.
Before we jump into more questions, we got to talk about recruiting. USC picked up a commit, 4-star wide receiver Gary Bryant in the All-American Bowl on Saturday. Shotgun, what's your take on Gary Bryant?
Gary Bryant is going to provide something that USC did not use this season. I won't say they didn't have it. Velus Jones does have speed. However, for whatever reason, they chose not to use him. He's in the transfer portal again. Yeah. I don't know if there were hard feelings or whatever about him being in the transfer portal before. He never got a real opportunity, but I think they will use Gary Bryant, and they'll use him to open up the offense even more. You're going to see, because of his speed, he has the speed to get behind defenses. He has the speed to take those short, the short screen passes that they have. He can take one of those for a touchdown. He's a guy that if you give him a little crease, he's going to be gone. Similar to Keenan Kristen, as a running back. And, I got a tweet about this yesterday. Well, they had Keenan Kristen and they didn't use him. It's different when it's a running back, and, whether you're going to get hit 15 or 20 times a game versus a guy that you get him on the outside and, he's getting hit by a cornerback versus getting hit by a linebacker or a 300-pound defensive tackle over and over. So I think that he's going to be a guy they can use in different ways. And even if he's not the threat on the play, his speed will allow them to run goes with him that will back up the safeties and open up short intermediate routes, which is something they want to run. They want to throw a lot in this offense. So I think it just adds another element to this offense. And I think he's a guy that can get on the field early because of that. Now he's got to learn the plays and all those type things. And he's going to be a guy that's going to need to add some weight to his body frame so that he can take more than 1 or 2 hits in a game, like Keenan Kristen, same thing. But I think that he's going to add a lot to this offense. The speed that they didn't have with any of the receivers that they used this year. No one has that explosive speed like he does. So I think it adds a different dynamic that they didn't really have.
In that sense, Guy on Facebook said, could USC have too many wide receivers next year?
There's never such thing as too many wide receivers.
Especially in an air raid system.
Says a former wide receiver. No, I just think that the different body types and the different styles that they have are important. They do different things, so I don't think it's too much. And the fact that they were trying to get other guys, Gary Bryant was not the only receiver they were actively recruiting this cycle. They were not only going to take one receiver. LV Bunkley Shelton was a silent commit at one point. He went to Arizona State. They looked at a couple other guys in this class as well, so they were looking for other receivers, so it's not like that. And, you lose Michael Pittman, you could lose Tyler Vaughn, and you still don't have that many, actual scholarship wide receivers on the roster compared to what you probably would normally have in an air raid system. Yeah. So I think they want to add some more guys there. I would still love to see them use some guys in different ways guys like Stephen Carr, get them out there and use them as an actual receiver at times to create mismatches and different things they could do with some backs and the tight ends that they have as well. But they do need to get more receivers because, after you lose Pittman, you're going to lose Tyler Vaughns in the next year as well. Valus is now gone. You lost a bunch of guys last year in the transfer portal, so they need to restock the wide receiver depth chart there a little bit as well. But I think Gary Bryant just creates a little bit different element than they had that they used this year.
That All-American Bowl used to be the cream of the crop for USC, where they just sweep up commitments. USC only got one on Saturday. What does that say about their recruiting prowess right now, and the Oregons and the ASUs of the Pac-12 kind of taking that crown a little bit?
I mean, I wrote an LA Times story about the commitments and about the game yesterday, and I basically said that USC fans used to look forward to the beginning of the year because traditionally a time of really a lot of excitement because you got the Rose Bowl, USC's playing in it. I don't know, it seems like every other year. And if they weren't in the Rose Bowl, you at least go to the All-American games and go, okay, that's what's going to get us back to the Rose Bowl is what's playing in these couple of All-Star games. And before Gary Bryant committed, there was not a USC commit in that game, and USC normally dominates. In particular, that game, the former Army All-American Bowl, now the All-American Bowl on NBC, I think is the official title of it, because they actively seek out the best players in the West. And so you get the best of the best on the West usually in that game. You'll have a couple people go to the Under Armour game that's in Orlando every year, but the best players in the West normally go to the San Antonio game. And so USC is normally either in contention for several guys or already have guys committed there. So usually that's kind of a USC love fest for a lack of a better word. You see the caps on the table. There were 10 in-game commitments. 5 guys had hats on the table that had a USC hat. Only one of them picked USC this game. Now 4 of those guys had been, we'll say, heavy USC leans previously. Dwight McLaughlin was a guy that was silently committed to USC. LV Bunkley Shelton silently committed to USC. Darion Green-Warren silently committed to USC. None of those 3 guys ended up at USC. Now, what does that tell you about what a silent commit actually means, especially in this day and age when verbal commits don't mean as much? Silent commits aren't, there's been players in the past that have silently committed to like 5 schools. So they don't mean a ton but it's just still a part of the process. And unfortunately for USC, they didn't close strong in this game. A lot of times this game, you get a couple commitments that build some momentum towards the February signing date. Now, the February signing date has obviously been, lessened its impact by the early signing period. But you look at last year, USC was able to get Brew McCoy and Kyle Ford and, build a little momentum towards closing the class out. This year, you get Gary Bryant, and I think he's an important piece for the offense, but you just don't have that momentum like you've had in the past. And now there's the top 25 players in the state of California have all now committed. Gary Bryant was the final one to announce his commitment publicly, and he's the only one that USC signed. So that just speaks volumes about how USC is not able to hold on to the local talent. Yeah. So they're struggling right now. This class needed offensive linemen. They got some offensive linemen. They didn't get the cream of the crop that they wanted to get. But there's plenty of players that they wanted to get that they also did not get to. So it's just the class is struggling. They are out of the cellar in the Pac-12. They did move up to 10th.
Ooh, so hey, I still say Pac-10 a lot too. So technically, when I say Pac-10,
they are up to number 56 now. Dwight McLaughlin, if he would have committed to USC, because I was kind of looking at the numbers there, they would have moved in the top 50. That didn't happen. So USC needs to close strong. They still need to get some more. There's certain positions they need to get some bodies in, but it's not looking very good right now. Now, can they still win next year without a recruiting class being successful this season? Yes.
Next year is the key phrase, though?
Yes, because it may hurt them a little bit down the road. Now, they can bounce back and could produce the number 1 class next year.
Yep.
However, I feel like this was a big class to miss on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have 2 5-star quarterbacks, C.J. Stroud, a 4-star quarterback, all in your backyard. You have the best linebacker I've ever seen in high school in your backyard. You had Elias Ricks, who's a 5-star cornerback who was at Mater Dei, eventually moved away to IMG, but he was right there. There were several really high-end talents right in your backyard that you missed out on. Are all those high-end talents going to be there next year, or is it a little bit lower of a class? Because there's ebbs and flows of where the talent is every season. California always has a bunch of talent, but it isn't always the top end talent. And this year was one of the years where they definitely had the top end talent, and USC was just not. It was a critical class to miss on, I think.
Yeah, the last two classes. Ricky says, do you know if this staff is going to go after any elite JUCO players to fill needs?
We haven't heard many rumblings about junior college players. So if there's any elite guys out there, we would have heard about it by now. They might snag a guy late or something. I think what you're going to see more likely is that if USC doesn't feel like they can fill guys, rather than reaching, which they did a little bit last year, and that's part of the reason why they only had so many scholarships this year. So using that as an excuse also goes back to how you set up your recruiting. So you can't use that as an excuse as a coaching staff, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So they reached on some guys late last year. They needed to fill some certain positions, but I still felt like they reached on some guys that didn't necessarily have to, that they could have got by this season with the depth that they had. So that's why the class was smaller. But instead of reaching this year, I think they learned from their lesson and they look for the transfer portal and guys potentially in there. It just becomes there's so many more people in the transfer portal now, and the coaches are starting to figure it out a little bit more. That I think they would leave some spots open potentially for that rather than reaching on some high school prospects.
In that sense, Jasper Smith wants to know, how do you see this class shaping up in February? Is it more recruits, high school recruits, or leaning into the portal?
I think you get a few more, high school recruits. They really want to get a running back. They would like to get a quarterback as well in this class. So there's a couple of positions they really want to add some bodies. Now, how much do you reach on those bodies? That becomes the question. But I think that you also got to really study the transfer portal, see, put the fillers out there for the guys that are already in the portal to see if there's any connection there. Because if you can pull in a guy like Drew Richmond, who is a solid starter in his one season, and then you have a bigger class the next year where you can go out and you can get a 4-star guy instead of having to take a lower 3-star guy, then I think that's a much better option. But you just got to kind of assess where those transfers are and how much you think you can bring in. So it's going to be kind of a process for them to kind of weigh what they think they can get signed in February or down the road in the transfer portal.
Yep, makes sense. We reached the top of the hour, so I'm going to go into rapid fire. Also dip into our calls because we have a full call queue. First off, AKA Boone on YouTube says, which base defense fits our personnel? Taylor Mays? Putting you on the spot.
I mean, I would say, you talking about like what front or what front? I would say you could run 4-3 or 3-4. It just depends on who you want to use. Are you talking about for next year?
Yes.
Probably, I actually would rather our guys play like a 3-4 or a 4-3 with like it's called an elephant, which is just kind of like a 3-4, but it's just a different personnel thing. But because I want to get Drake Jackson off the edge. I would like him to stand up. I'd like him to be able to be athletic. And I think sometimes when he has to put his hand in the ground, it just makes it harder for those guys when they're pass rushing. On first and second down, can you go into like a true base or a true 4-3? Maybe. But the problem is a lot of times with these offenses that we're facing, they're coming on the field with 11 personnel, which is, Keely, what is 11 personnel?
Don't put me. I'm reading comments
11
right now.
personnel is one running back,
end.
and one running back. So it's 3 wide receivers. So the mismatch comes with that third wide receiver. Do you keep a linebacker on the field to guard the slot wide receiver? For our slot wide receiver is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Or do you put a nickel on the field? So you could go like a 4-2-5 in base. So it really kind of just depends on what the offense is doing. And I think that's been the difficult part about the last couple of years in college football is – especially if you look at our offense, what do you identify Drake London as? Is he a tight end? Probably more of a wide receiver, but do you stay in nickel? Do you go dime? So base defense is kind of a different thing now. The interesting part is Iowa lined up in like 13 personnel, 22 personnel. I mean, they got down. They were running like Big Ten football, and I don't know if our guys I'm trying to think about who else we played this season that kind of got in there and just played almost like AFC North big boy football because
Stanford basically
oh,
has
yeah,
stopped
Stanford.
doing that, but
Oh, Stanford didn't. Yeah, Stanford was not the same way that they have in the
Yeah.
past. So it's kind of different. Like a base defense is almost not what a base defense used to be in the past.
I mean, I think you're going to have nickel just because the way so many teams in this conference play with a lot of wide receivers on the field. And I think you like your guys that you have in the secondary, like Greg Johnson playing the nickelback position. Now, one of the things they did with Iowa, just to touch on it, but when they went with those heavy packages, Greg Johnson stayed on the field, so your nickelback was on the field, but they removed one of the other cornerbacks. So Elijah Griffin would come off the field or Chris Steele would come off the field, and they would leave Greg Johnson out there.
Because the size of it.
And then kept it with basically a 4-3 personnel otherwise. So that was kind of an interesting thing that they tried to do in that game as well. But I think that depending on who's healthy, when you have Jordan Iosefa, you have Pali and Itiote. If Solomon Tulialapupu is out there, you're going to want all three of those guys in the field. Now, can someone run enough? That's the question, whether you run a 4-3 or a 3-4. Either way, can one of those linebackers run enough to cover
what I'm talking about.
that
The
slot
receiver.
So that's going to be the big question. You may end up with a 4-2-5. That's basically been what Clancy Pendergast has had in his arsenal for the most part. That's basically been the base, even though they called their 5-2 front was what they called their base, with 3 true defensive linemen and then 2 defensive end stand-up outside linebackers. In the past, but they used it so rarely. Their main thing was 4 guys up front, 2 linebackers, and nickel on the field at all times. So I would like to see them, the next defense coordinator, be willing to throw a dime out there every once in a while, do things like that instead of staying in the base almost all the time like USC did under Clancy Pendergast. So we'll see. There's a lot of question marks to come. I think that USC's defense can mold because you have really talented players on all 3 levels. So I think that with the 3 defensive tackles they have in the middle, you can do a little bit more. So I think that with Marlon, Brendan Peely, and Jay Tufele, you want 2 of those guys on the field.
You want to keep them inside,
As far as timing goes, how do you expect this to play out? I know USC's players don't return until next Monday, but USC's timing on hirings and decisions so far this offseason has been a little odd. What are you expecting going forward?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know how any of this really works. So you're going to have to ask Shotgun.
We appreciate the honesty, Taylor.
I really do not know what they're going to.
Unfortunately, everyone should kind of feel that way, because what should happen and what has happened has not been the same. What should happen is immediately after your final game, you make a decision. You announce a decision, because you have the early signing period has pushed up the schedule so much and cramped so much in December, when December used to kind of be a kind of like ease down month for college football. Everything is ramped up now as far as hirings, firings, those type of things, with the recruiting aspect in there. So you should have made a decision then. Okay, now when you go and you've made that decision during that week, or even after the Utah game, you find out you're not going to be in the Pac-12 championship. Okay, now if we're going to make the decision to fire the defense coordinator and the special teams coordinator, now's the time to do it. Don't wait another month until you play a bowl game. If you know, then bring someone else new in. Let them start working with the players, especially looking back and
ranting, shotgun rant.
Especially looking back in 2020 vision. But
when
you see what happened in the game, what did it matter? What did it matter whether you brought someone in that was fresh? Come in and install your entire defense. Install every special teams play you got. Doesn't matter if you're going to get worked by Iowa in both of those aspects. So, in hindsight, it makes no sense at all not to have made a move. But even before that, to me, it didn't make a move. You knew you were going to make it. You make it immediately and then start working on the next phase. You can't make changes until you actually start to make those changes.
Yep. We usually have a Ryan rant. Shotgun, you took the mantle today. Thank you for that. I'm going to get to a question and then go to callers. This one's for you, Taylor. It's from Temetsud, I believe, on YouTube, who says, how do you think the defenses you were a part of in college would do against USC's current air raid offense? Just curious if you think our air raid would be productive against great defenses.
They might do all right. They wouldn't. Well, we struggled to run the ball this year. against everybody, so they for sure wouldn't run the ball against us. But it can be hard. I mean, we have a really good offense. They throw Keaton's really progressed throughout the season. Our wide receivers do a pretty good job, but I just don't know if they could take it and hit and hit and hit and hit. If they'd be ready for that kind of mentality. So I don't know. Maybe they would complete a couple balls. Maybe one time out of
pride.
10 they might something, but
So you don't think Michael Pittman Jr. could take a hit? Or
I think Mike Pittman
St.
Jr.
Brown?
could take a hit. I think Mike Pittman could take a hit. I have a lot of respect for him.
You don't think Amon-Ra St. Brown could take a hit?
I don't know if he'd want to take these hits.
He's taken plenty of hits as the slot receiver at USC. He is as tough as they come.
Yeah.
I think you're underselling this wide receiver.
I think
quality.
No, I just pumped them up. I said our guys are. I really like our offense. I've pumped our guys up on offense the entire day. But I'm just saying, we're talking about another level of.
The problem is when you include him in it, of course he's going to be the one.
We're
that
talking
wins.
about guys that lift weights all day long. There was no Instagram back then, no Twitter. Guys were just lifting weights and drinking protein shakes.
Oh my god! Alrighty, let's jump into calls. I think it's Jonathan from Pasadena. Your first caller on the line. Hello.
Hello, Tunnel Vision. I would like to make a question and a comment. My question is, when Alabama beats us, if Bryce Young is the starting quarterback, how embarrassing will that be for our football team and our athletic department? And my comment is, due to the fact that Iowa, being a mid-level Big Ten team, beat us that badly, USC now stands for University of Sorry Coaching. Goodbye.
Yeah, I think it would be embarrassing just because that's a guy that everyone thought was the future of USC. Now, the question is going to be the announcement that's made tomorrow, I believe it is, with Tua Tagovailoa deciding whether or not he's going to return to Alabama. Now, when Bryce Young gets to Alabama, even if Tua is gone to the draft, he still has to beat out two other quarterbacks. And the quarterback that came in for Tua looked pretty good in the bowl game against Michigan. I'm blanking on his name right now, but I thought he looked really good. So Bryce is going to have to come in and beat out that guy and Tua's little brother. Yeah. Now, beating out Tua's little brother, I don't think will be that big of a deal because watching him in the Poly Bowl last year, I just don't think he's at the same caliber. Yeah. But he has had a year in the system. He's going to look better. But so he's got to go in and win the job first before he makes that. Now, can he come in and do what Jalen Hurts did against USC, where Blake Barnett started the game and then Jalen Hurts took over and that started his run as quarterback at Alabama? Sure. But I think, yes, if that's the way it transpired, it would be embarrassing to USC because he was a longtime commit, was the ringleader of the class until October when he decided to flip over to Alabama.
Mac Jones, Shottington.
Mac Jones, that's correct.
The point that the caller brought up about, I'll talk about Alabama in a second, but Iowa being a mid-level team, I thought was an interesting point. And they said on the broadcast of the game, they were talking about Iowa's recruiting classes having been in 30s, 40s, 40s, 50s, something like that. Like, average recruiting classes, and they just look to out-execute us. And I think that this is just something that really bothers people, and it bothers me because we're looking at a football team that, from the Big Ten that wasn't Ohio State, wasn't Penn State, was a team that really, they only had 3 losses, but technically in standings, they're somewhat of a mid-level team. So that is frustrating. But I think also at the same time, they came out, had a game plan, and the way that they executed is the way that we would like to execute. We have more speed, let's say athletic ability, but I think in that game you saw where speed and athleticism aren't the same thing as coming out and executing the game plan.
Yeah.
It's almost like I can't say that would be a little too sketchy, but the basketball team that's like really tall and athletic and, like jumping and dunking, but they don't play with any discipline versus the team of Rudies that are just kind of, but they play extremely well together. And I think our team needs to develop that, and that working with having great athletic ability is what makes these teams great. And on the Alabama level, real quick, it'd be interesting because on a national level, this will be USC's chance to make a statement. Now, does it matter in the context of the Rose Bowl or the Pac-12? No, not at all. But on a national level, with everybody watching, I don't know, 9 months of Clay Helton just taking, criticism, the team taking criticism, the university taking criticism, that'll be a shot to make a statement. Mm-hmm. What do they want to do with it? That I would be, if I was one of the players, I mean, you want to prepare for every game the same, but I would be so excited for this chance against Alabama to say, hey, we've done this in the past. Yeah, we've messed up the last 2 seasons, but this is our chance to rectify everything. Now, in the context of the Pac-12, it's just one game. They still have to go on and prepare the same after, but it is a huge chance to make a statement for this football team. Mm-hmm. So, what more motivation do you need?
True.
I mean, those guys should just go live in a cave and just go to practice, work out.
Protein shakes?
Yeah. Maybe go to class, but
or go to class.
They should be just laser focused and then take that same work ethic throughout the rest of the season.
It makes sense. Let's go on to, speaking of Iowa, we have a caller from Iowa, Dave. Let's go to him. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hey guys, it's Dave from Iowa, and my question was involving the transfer portal. Specifically, do you think any USC guys will enter any more USC guys would enter the portal, specifically the tight end position, since the air raid system really isn't a very friendly tight end offensive scheme? And then another question: do you think ASU has a chance to beat us, since we barely beat them without their starting quarterback, and that starting quarterback just got more offensive weapons this past weekend? Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Sure, Arizona State has a chance to beat just like any other team in the Pac-12 because USC's not dominant anymore. So any team has a chance. If you want to play the who was out game, USC had players out too. Yeah. So that kind of plays into it, which Ryan wants to give them credit for that game and say that they would have won if they had Jaden Daniels. I'm not so quick to do that. But I think that the other aspect – which I'm blanking on
Transfer portal,
the tight ends. That's what I was looking at. Tight ends. I mean, Eric Cromanhook played over 400 snaps this year, so it's not like they don't use the tight end at all. They're using it a different way. I think Eric Cromanhook, it fits him well because he's more of a blocking guy, which is why I think you saw much more of him than Josh Follow, who had 115 offensive snaps this season.
Follow was also injured this season.
He was injured for part of the season as well. He missed 2 games and didn't play on offense in a couple games after that. So I think a guy like Jack Geary, who just what I've seen of him in high school, how versatile he is, I think really would fit well in that tight end spot. I don't know if either one of Josh Follow or Eric Cromanhook necessarily fits the mold of what would be ideal. But if you look back at Cliff Kingsbury's first year at Texas Tech, he came in, he had a really good tight end. The tight end won the Mackey Award, which is the best tight end in the country, because he said, hey, this guy's a mismatch problem. Mm-hmm. And we're going to throw him out there. I'm going to get him on linebackers, and nobody's going to be able to guard him. And they threw the ball to him over and over and over. I think if they had that type of guy, then I think they would use the tight end much more. But I just don't think that on the roster they had a guy that they felt was dynamic enough to be the blocker when they would bring him back as an H-back, and then also be the guy to run out there and catch a pass. Yeah. I think they just felt like, hey, if we're going to put a guy and we're going to split him out, why would we not put Drake London in there?
Yeah, it's all about mismatch.
Yeah, I think it's more about mismatch. Personnel. And Drake London, is a bigger mismatch there. And because of the tempo as well, I think tempo plays a reason into why they don't use the tight end. They don't split the tight end out, because they weren't going that really fast pace that you kind of thought that they would. And if they did that, then you're trying to keep the defense, certain players on the field, you're trying to wear them down, and then you split the tight end out, and he becomes an option because you don't want to take the time to substitute and let them sub as well. Whereas this year it was more about getting the right play and calling. It was a little bit slower offense than maybe we anticipated, than Graham Harrell anticipated. He talked about in the middle of the season of, how he was having 18 drives a game at North Texas, and now he's getting 10 or 12 in a game.
Yeah.
So it was different for him, and the pacing and stuff. So I think that played into the tight ends not being used as much, because you'd rather have Drake London out there running out for a catch, because the kid's athleticism is unreal. We watched him, a couple clips the basketball team put out today of him throwing down windmills and stuff.
True. And since Ryan's not here, we might get a basketball minute too at the end of the show. But with Michael Pittman moving on, who's the next guy poised to become that tall receiving threat for USC?
I don't know who the next guy is, but one guy that I really want to challenge, one guy that I want to see step up and do some of the things that we've talked about on this show is 81, Kyle Ford. I know he was injured in the beginning of the season, but he's a kid who is a top recruit. And these are the kind of guys that we need to get. I can't say our money's worth, but the guys who are
The most
highest rated players, we need to get a lot out of him. And if I were him, I would be really excited, not necessarily to lose a player like Michael Pittman, but I would be excited because of the opportunity that it presents. Just for him to, and he played on kickoff, I think, towards the end of the season. I saw him in the bowl game. But somebody like him really needs to kind of step up and develop into this role, learn some of the things or do some of the things that he saw Michael Pittman doing that made him successful throughout the season. And he's a guy that I want to see take on a huge role going into next year. I don't know what's going to happen with Tyler Vaughns, but I've always liked Tyler Vaughns. I think he's a very smooth wide receiver. He kind of just has it's almost like when you watch – I don't watch it, but when you watch ballet, there's just the fluidity in how they move. He's like, you can't teach that. And hopefully he stays. I think if he were to stay, he would, be somewhere around where Michael Pittman was this year. But Kyle Ford, man, if he can step up, I think the offense won't really lose anything. We won't. Most of the time when you lose a player like Michael Pittman, your offense struggles the next year. But I think with the guys that we have, we could push forward and really maybe even be better in terms of our wide receivers next year.
Yeah, and Kyle Ford is a big body receiver.
Yeah.
He goes up and makes those same type of catches you saw from Michael Pittman. Brew McCoy is another guy that can do similar. He also has a defensive mentality like Michael Pittman. He was an outside linebacker / defensive end in high school, and the same thing as you heard with Michael Pittman. He probably is better on the defense side, or he might be a better pro if he goes to the defense. Those type of things were said about him as well. So I think they have similar mentalities. So I think you're going to be able to replace those guys. Michael Pittman on the outside. Now, where's the other guys fit in? There's plenty of weapons on USC's offense. Yeah. How can you get the ball to all of them? That's kind of a question.
Alrighty, let's go to our final caller in the queue. I believe it is Mitchell from Utah. Hello, you are live on Tunnel Vision.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
Good. I just wanted to see what your guys' opinion was with there being a new defensive coordinator. Do you think that will bring about more change on the staff just because if somebody comes in and they want their own people? And I brought up a couple weeks ago, I called Taylor, we need you on the defensive staff. We need some dogs like you and Brian Cushing out there just yelling at people. So if you can make that happen, that'd be great.
Thanks,
I don't think they can let coach because he's a little too hands-on. He might he might be choke slamming players if they don't do the right thing.
Interesting. We have gotten that question a lot, Taylor, since we're on the topic. Since there is a GA opening, since Chris Hawkins is now the new DB's coach for ASU, a lot of people have asked, would you want to be a GA for USC?
I can't go to class.
You wouldn't take whatever. Yeah, that's your choice. That's
no
your choice.
comment.
Okay, there you go.
Yes, there could be more changes coming on the coaching staff. Anytime you bring in someone who's at a higher level, the people below him are in danger of being fired or being moved or being replaced in any business structure. So when you bring in a coordinator, then they're going to assess the positions.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes you hire someone and say, hey, we want you to try to keep these guys. Will that happen with USC? That's a question that will have to be answered by the defense coordinator who says, no, I won't accept that. Or, yeah, sure, that's fine. I like this guy anyways. Those type of things go on in the discussions, the contract negotiations, those type of things. Those are all discussed beforehand, but the defense coordinator can be like, no, I want all my guys. I want to choose my own staff. and then you'll see that there will be more changes. There are going to be more changes. I don't know how many will be on the defensive side, but there will be more changes, I'm pretty sure. You get a new coordinator in, you're going to get some position coaches that are moved out or they want their own guys in.
Well, coaches and defensive coordinators, for people that don't, I mean, but the callers that don't know, people listening that don't know this, defensive coaches have defensive schemes. So they like to have position coaches that have coached within the scheme of the defense, because if you bring in a coach who has never coached under a certain type of defense, then they're learning the defense just like the players are learning the defense. But some of these coaches have been coaching especially the coordinators, have been coaching these defenses for 20 years. So yes, the defenses evolve and some of the things change, but I mean they have it down. They know these defenses cold. They want position coaches who are kind of brought up within the same defense rather than going out and just picking the best DB coach, he might be, have been brought up in a different defensive system. So that goes into consideration also.
If you have a defensive line coach that is used to coaching with four-down linemen, you teach that a certain different way and it's compared to if you go get a defense coordinator that runs a 3-3-5.
Yeah.
Your defensive linemen are asked to do a lot different thing in a 3-3-5 versus a true 4-3 or something like that. So you want someone who knows how to teach to the defense as well, and so that plays into it, which is why last season's Tim Drevno and Kerry Colbert being retained on the staff when neither one of them had coached in the air raid was kind of surprising. So sometimes it does happen, but usually a coordinator wants to come in and say, I need guys that know the type of system I already have.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you for the call. Okay, let's go through our questions that we have saved up, and then we'll wrap it up. Racer X on YouTube says, Taylor, what are your thoughts on Ken Norton Jr. potentially as a defensive coordinator for USC?
Are they considering him?
I think he just wanted your thoughts on it.
Oh. It's funny because we were speaking about it earlier. I was going to bring up Ken Norton Jr. because I know for myself, I know for most players, you did just mentioned Brian Cushing. Most players that played at USC and even the guys that up in Seattle nobody dislikes Ken Norton Jr. Seriously. But it's weird balance because he's cool, he makes you laugh, like you could have fun with him, but you don't want to disappoint him. And he'll cuss you out, he will embarrass, like he'll make you feel bad, he'll make you feel like, you let the entire team down, but then he'll bring you back up, and that's kind of the attitude. He's tough,
super intense.
Tough, like we're going to go in there and we're going to punch him in the mouth, and that's just, he develops those types of players, you know what I mean? So I don't know if he. I don't know.
I think it would be hard to get him out of Seattle.
Yeah, he has a great situation. That would be hard, but he would be a great person. But he's his attitude and the type of mentor, the type of kind of role model that he is. You can't say to him, "Well, you've never done it before, so what do you know what you're talking about?" Because he can. You can't say that with him. So. But that type of attitude and kind of developing what we were talking about, the physicality of being a football player, that's what we need for this football team. And I think if we could get something similar to that would be great.
Beck on YouTube said, who would you start at quarterback for USC's first game against Alabama? Remember, we have a porous offensive line, and the QB is guaranteed to get hurt. So I think Beck is getting some 340 chess over here.
There's no guarantee that anyone's going to be hurt. Keaton Slovis is going to be the guy, I think. He's going to have 9 months to progress in this offense that JT Daniels is still rehabbing. The question still will be, when does JT return from the injury? When can he be back on the field? Yep. If he's back by fall camp, he has a shot at the starting job, at that competition. However, I just think that all this time that he's rehabbing, Slovis has got a chance to get better.
It's tough.
I thought that they were, at the beginning of the season, I thought JT was clearly the guy. But by this point, I think that Keaton is better in this offense right now. So at the worst, they're even right now, and Keaton still has opportunities to grow in the next next 6 months or 8 months or whatever until JT's back on the field. Whereas JT's just all he can do really is watch film, maybe throw stationary.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
Yep. Ricky on YouTube said, why didn't Clancy Pendergast simplify things for the young defensive players if that was the case? Again, it shows the staff's inability to make adjustments, and it shows up whether in games or on the practice field.
Now, he supposedly did simplify
That's
things.
what we had heard this offseason.
But, I mean, they never were able to put all the young guys in positions to excel, I think. And maybe simplification versus doing something different might be where the terminology was not the same for them. I don't know. I just they said that they simplified it, and he said the year before, I think, they simplified it. How much was simplified, it's hard to say without being in that meeting room.
Yeah. We had kind of heard from, like, the older vets that it was kind of like, yeah, it's been changed, I guess. So I don't know where that really came from. So I don't know.
It's different in, I don't know, a lot of things have changed in maybe the past 10 whatever years, but it's different in college because the guys have to go to class and they only have a certain amount of time to go to meetings. So everything that they do extra is kind of on their own, I think, in terms of watching film and stuff like that. So that's where you need guys, especially the older guys, to kind of bring the younger guys in and say, hey, we're going to watch film. We're going to, do you know your playbook? Because there is a difference between knowing that it says curl flat and understanding what curl flat is, right? Mm-hmm. And so if there's only, like when I was in school, it was about 4 hours a day, 1 to, what is that? Like my bad math, too many concussions, 1 to 5. And that included meetings and practice. So I don't know if these guys are just kind of going through the meetings, but some of the guys just need more time. And I think that maybe that's where they just missed out on it because they weren't coming in after. You want guys that are coming in early, watching film, going to practice, going to meetings, and then coming in after practice, getting rehab, watching film, and still learning. You want guys that you use the term like they're like a pro. They're being a pro. They're doing all the things that they need to do, and you want it from the top down. You want the older guys to show the younger guys how to do it. So maybe there was a disconnect in that with guys not being familiar as they should have been with the defense.
I think that goes back to what Warren, asked earlier is, how much goes on Clay Helton versus goes on the players. You need leadership to help push people in that direction. Yeah. But it all starts at the top. So that's why there's the lynch mob.
Desi on Facebook wanted to know, will next year be the year that the coaches figure out the injury problems?
I'm going to say no because it's been a trend for 4 or 5 years now.
I personally, and maybe this will get some pushback, but I would rather have our guys go into practice being a little bit beat up than being too fresh because I don't know. I think that obviously we don't want our guys to be hurt, but I'd rather work hard during the week, get bumps and bruises, and then fight to be able to rehab and get my body feeling fresh rather than kind of just coasting through the week and feeling fresh the entire time because football is just a ton of hits. I'll give you an example. In training camp, the first week, like everybody's arms are bruised up, all arms bruised up from hitting. And then after the first week, it goes away. But you never get the bruises ever again throughout the rest of the season. I don't know why it happens. It's almost like there's an initial contact thing, and then throughout the rest of the season, it's not like the bruises stay or you continue to get them after the game. So I almost feel like it's the same example for everything else. Guys just need to kind of, you don't want guys to get hurt, can't hit the quarterback, but, you just want to kind of.
So basically, if we see anyone that has bruises on their arms, that means they're not working hard enough?
Well, something like that. Or you basically want everybody to have calluses around their entire body, just because they've been.
But it's a chicken or an egg thing, right? Because I feel like the Clay Helton mindset or those of the staff is if we keep them fresh in the week, they'll be healthier in games. But
which I can agree with.
Which makes sense. But also, if you're not used to doing the right things, getting the right tackling angles in practice every day, then you're more susceptible to maybe sticking an arm out or doing something like that. So where do you lie in that chicken or egg theory?
Well, so the idea is that you don't want to be out there, let's say, practicing for a long time. But what you want to do is you want to go 100% at practice, almost as close to game speed as you can. But you're not wearing the guys out. But the reps that they are getting are full speed reps, and hopefully there is some hitting or being physical, but you're just not doing it, hit after hit after hit. So guys are getting the top peak intensity of it, but they're not getting, pounded repetitively throughout the week or throughout the season. So it's kind of a balance, but you want to be short, but 100% rather than kind of going at 80%, but because then you're not like you can't tackle at 80%. You go into a game and that little running back just shakes you. It's we're talking about tenths of a second here, hundredths of a second.
Yeah.
And it helps that if you're beat up a little bit in training camp or something and you practice through it so that you know how it feels.
Yeah.
I mean, Chuma Adoga talked about this. Mike Goff would get on him and say, look, when you get in the pros, you're going to be beat up every game.
Yeah.
So do you want to be a pro or not?
And they don't care. I mean, you have to.
Oh, you rolled your ankle? Do you need to sit out the rest of practice? No, get back out there. We'll tape it up. Get back out there. Learn, see how it feels to play with an ankle that's not 100%, and then go and get treatment and get it fixed the next day. But then you get in a game, you roll an ankle in the first quarter. Are you done for the game, or are you going to play through it? And knowing how to play through it. Okay, now I can't push off as well with this. How do I compensate? Those type of things. Those all go into when you're practicing and you get beat up a little bit during practice.
Yeah. As far as USC's recruiting strategy, Jasper Smith on YouTube says, considering how many players are coming back next season, would it be wise not to sign any more quote-unquote project recruits in the 2020 cycle and save those scholarships for the 2021 class?
Definitely, and I think that's not necessarily just for the 2021 class, but also for the transfer portal potential of guys coming in as well, especially if they're one-year guys. You get them in, you use them, and then you still have that scholarship next year as part of that class. So I think that's a much better option than kind of reaching a little bit. And you get a guy like Trey Davis who, came in, was a very low-rated guy. There was a lot of question marks about him coming to USC, and then he didn't even make it through the summer, and he was gone. But his scholarship still held at USC. They couldn't use that scholarship again this season, as an initial counter. So it's better to get guys that belong rather than reaching a little bit and then just having guys that either won't play ever and can't be impact players or, are going to transfer soon just because, they realize that this is not the level that they probably need to be at.
Let's go to our basketball minute before we wrap it up. Currently, USC is losing to UW, but they're 12-2 coming into this game. Shotgun, your thoughts?
They're just very inconsistent. The fact that they won on the road last on Wednesday, Thursday was good against Washington State, but getting the consistency is the biggest thing. Will this team start to do that now that they're in conference play? That's the biggest question and why there's still a lot of concerns about how far this team can go. I mean, Onyeka Okongwu in the middle is a absolute beast. He had 27 points coming off an ankle injury in the last game. He throws down ridiculous dunks. He's also tremendous at finishing with either hand near the rim. He can shoot a little jumper as well. But there's just, there's a lot of question marks about them being consistent. It starts with the point guard play. They had 20 turnovers last game. Now, a lot of those were charges because the refs were pretty terrible in that game. But if they play better, if the point guards play better, then the offense rolls a little bit smoother, and then you don't have long lulls. That's been the biggest squint. Their defense has actually been pretty good. Their numbers, especially defensive field goal percentages, those type things, their numbers are pretty good defensively, but the offense just too often has 4 or 5 minute stretches where they don't score at all. They had one in each half of the Washington game, and they still shot almost 50% in that game. So if they can eliminate those things, find a go-to play that just gets them a bucket to end droughts, and I think they'll be a lot better going to the stretch. But big test today, playing at Washington. They were down 14 at half. Can they make a little run in the second half? They're plenty capable. Somebody's probably going to have to knock down some threes against the zone that Washington likes to play, though.
Interesting. Thank you for the basketball minute. Ryan is watching, so sorry, Ryan, for that. I know that offended you.
It's hard to win in Seattle, Washington, though. I just want to let you know that Seattle is hard to.
You're Seattle
It's hard
biased.
to be successful in, but I'm just
saying. It is hard to be successful, like living and being successful with all that rain.
Shotgun, there's probably questions that I missed. On YouTube, Austin says, do you think Taylor was the last of a dying breed as a big safety before the Cam Chancellors of the world, that role was developed?
I think that Taylor's role is different just because it's how the offenses have changed and how you have guys like Tyreek Hill. It's much more difficult for a big guy like Taylor to be guarding a Tyreek Hill if you get him in the slot one-on-one.
Yeah.
So I think that because of the way teams are passing so much more now, it's more about being able to turn and run than it is to come down in the box and help out with the run game. Now, there's always going to be that place, but I think those guys are getting pushed up further towards the line of scrimmage and being in a linebacker position more than a safety spot now.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is because of the offensive personnels and kind of putting these slot receivers out there and running these routes, you don't have some of the safeties, free safeties or strong safeties can play these short, quick wide receivers side to side. But like for myself in the NFL, I still played safety sometimes on base, but a lot of times, or a lot of what I did was played like dime, which is basically just linebacker in nickel. And it's almost it's really a great position because that's where the tight end mismatches come, because you're trying to put we played Travis Kelce a couple of times, and he's too fast for a base linebacker, but he's too big for a cornerback. So you see some of the guys, Deion Buchanan for the Cardinals. He's from Washington State.
Yeah.
He's a safety that comes down into the box. Cam never really played back for Seattle. He was really truly the in-the-box guy, but he had a cast around him that kind of protected him, that allowed him to kind of be an extra linebacker and just move freely. But because of the offenses, you don't have like Kenny Easley type safeties or USC fans will know Dennis Smith, like the 6'3" guys that were just down, Steve Atwater, just tall downhill safeties, because they're going to empty and the guys are just getting shook in the open field.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that it's just to change the offense, because now if you go with a heavy personnel, you want to run at those safeties that are in the game now, and that's kind of the give and take is Before, you wanted your safeties to come down and tackle in the box. Now it's less about that, so the position is less about that, so there's a change there.
Alrighty. Shotgun, I'm sure there are questions that I missed. Is there anything you want to rapid fire before we wrap it up?
I don't think I lost track of some of them, but I think you got most of the ones that I had highlighted as well. So
nice.
I think we're good on that end.
Sweet. Any final thoughts then, Taylor? Anything you would like to add?
What's your 21 personnel?
No, I'm not being quizzed on this show. Thank you. Shotgun, anything you'd like to add?
It'll be interesting to see how the next couple of weeks play out as USC looks to hire their defense coordinator, and then the moves that come after that. But also, there's 10 days left before players have to be entered into the NFL draft. So they have 10 days to make that decision until January 15th. One for USC, but also keep an eye on the ones that are entering at Alabama as well, because we've seen some guys go in that were expected. There was a guy that went in today as well. Alex Leatherwood, former USC offensive lineman target, decided to come back. So they got they got one of their tackles back that could have left. So, it's just interesting to watch who's leaving as well and who USC may be facing in that first game.
Yep, makes sense. And we will be having a show on Sunday, where Sundays is 7 p.m. now, so make sure you stay tuned. But that's going to wrap it up for tonight's show. Taylor, thanks so much for filling in for Ryan. Always great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Keely.
That's going to wrap it up. That's Shotgun. That's Taylor. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all next time.